Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into Ripple. You might have heard of it, maybe alongside Bitcoin or Ethereum, but it's really its own thing. It's not quite the same. So we got excerpts here from an article called Ripple, Everything You Need to Know About XRP. And basically we want to figure out, how does Ripple work and, why is it important, especially compared to other cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because Ripple's not really trying to replace traditional finance, like some crypto projects. It's more about how can we improve the existing system?
Yeah, the article really emphasizes that. It says Ripple itself, it isn't actually a cryptocurrency, but it's got its own digital currency, right? It's called XRP.
Right.
And it's easy to get those mixed up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. A lot of people kind of get tripped up on that. The best way to think about it is Ripple is the network. It's like the infrastructure for moving money around. And then XRP is like the fuel. It's what powers those transactions on the Ripple network. And what's really attracting a lot of businesses and financial institutions to Ripple is the fact that it's just so much faster and cheaper than traditional banking methods.
Right. So instead of waiting days for an international transfer and paying, tons of fees, it's more like sending an instant message.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. And the reason they can do that is because of blockchain technology. So just like Bitcoin, right? Ripple uses a secure digital ledger to track transactions, but they have a different approach. The article compared it to Swift, which is what banks use globally. It's kind of like Swift, but with some serious upgrades.
So hold on. I thought crypto was all about disrupting banks, not working with them. That's what we usually hear about.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of the crypto projects are about decentralizing finance, right? And taking power away from those institutions. But Ripple's approach is more collaborative. They're like, hey, how can we connect banks and payment providers and use this standardized protocol so we can all do cheaper, instant global transactions together? They're not trying to dismantle the system. They're trying to optimize it from within.
Okay, so you've got this network of all these banks and institutions using Ripple, sending XRP back and forth to settle payments. But the article also mentioned that Ripple, it's not as decentralized as, say, Bitcoin or Ethereum. So does that mean that somebody still has control?
That's a question that gets debated a lot in the crypto community. So Ripple's developers, they do have some influence over the network security. They can choose which servers are allowed on the network, which isn't really the case with more decentralized blockchains like Bitcoin.
So it's not like a totally open and free system where anyone can just participate.
Right. And while that might not sit well with, some crypto purists, it's actually really appealing to a lot of financial institutions because they're accustomed to having a degree of control and oversight. So Ripple's approach kind of feels more familiar and secure.
So it's finding a middle ground, like a hybrid approach that tries to blend the best of both worlds.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of what makes Ripple so intriguing is trying to create a bridge between traditional finance and the decentralized world of crypto. Now, whether or not that strategy is going to be successful in the long run, that's a question we can't answer yet. But it's definitely shaking things up.
Yeah, it's definitely shaking things up. But let's dig into how it actually works. The article mentioned this unique node validation system,
Yeah.
which sounds pretty technical. Can you break that down for us a little bit?
Sure. So see, most blockchains rely on this process called mining, where you have these powerful computers competing to solve these complex problems, to validate transactions and add them to the blockchain. Ripple does things a bit differently. They use a system where there's this group of trusted validators called unique nodes, and they are responsible for verifying transactions and maintaining the integrity of the ledger.
So instead of just random computers competing to do this, it's more like you have this select group of pre-approved members who are in charge.
Precisely. And this is another reason why some people question whether Ripple is truly decentralized. Because, while anyone can theoretically become a validator, the network really does rely on this specific list of trusted nodes to function.
Interesting. So there's a trade-off there. It might be faster and more efficient, but it comes at the cost of, some of that decentralization. Is that what attracts institutions to Ripple? The fact that it offers a bit more control and predictability.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the appeal. Institutions are used to working within, a regulated environment. And so its unique node validation system provides them with a level of oversight and accountability that they're comfortable with.
That makes sense. So we've got this network that's faster and cheaper than traditional banking with this unique validation system that appeals to institutions. But how does it actually compare to other big crypto players like Bitcoin and Ethereum?
That's a great question, and it gets at the heart of what makes Ripple unique. Because while Bitcoin and Ethereum are aiming to disrupt the financial system, Ripple is really trying to work within it. It's more about improving existing processes rather than creating like a completely new paradigm.
So Bitcoin and Ethereum are like the rebels trying to overthrow the empire. And Ripple is like the diplomat trying to negotiate a peace treaty.
I like that. I like that analogy. And that difference in philosophy is reflected in the way they operate. So Bitcoin, it's all about decentralization, allowing anyone to participate in the network. Without permission, Ethereum is focused on building decentralized applications, creating a whole new ecosystem for finance and other industries. Ripple, on the other hand, is very laser-focused on making cross-border payments faster, cheaper, and more efficient for banks and financial institutions.
So they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. Bitcoin for its decentralization, Ethereum for its versatility, and Ripple for its focus on improving traditional finance. It's just so fascinating how the crypto world is evolving into this diverse ecosystem with all these different projects serving different purposes.
It truly is. And that diversity is one of the things that makes the crypto space so exciting. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, and each project brings its own unique perspective and approach to the table.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so interesting to follow and see where it all goes. But going back to Ripple and XRP, the article highlighted some of the benefits of using XRP, even with that centralized aspect we talked about. So what makes it so attractive?
Well, one of the biggest draws is speed. So the article claims XRP transactions take about 4 to 5 seconds, which is incredibly fast compared to Bitcoin, where transactions can take minutes or even longer.
Wow, so in the world of finance, where like every second counts, that speed must be a huge advantage.
Absolutely. And then you got the transaction fees. We're talking fractions of a penny with XRP, which is unheard of in traditional banking.
Yeah, that's got to be music to the ears of businesses doing lots of international transactions. But it's not just about speed and cost, right? The article mentioned XRP is really versatile too. It can be exchanged for other cryptos and fiat currencies like dollars and euros.
Exactly. Think of it like a universal translator for money. And that versatility is one reason why you're seeing some major financial institutions start to use Ripple, the article named Santander and Bank of America, as examples. And these are institutions that move massive amounts of money daily. So their adoption of Ripple really speaks volumes about its potential.
So we've got speed, we've got low cost, we've got versatility, and big name backing. Sounds like a recipe for success, but no investment is without risk. So what are some of the drawbacks of Ripple and XRP that investors should be aware of?
You're absolutely right. No investment is perfect. I think one of the biggest criticisms, as we've already kind of touched on, is that semi-centralized nature, right? So those default validators on the network mean that Ripple just isn't as decentralized as other blockchains. And that raises concerns about control and censorship.
So while that might appeal to institutions who are used to having that control, it could be a turnoff for people who believe in like the truly decentralized spirit of crypto.
Precisely. And then there's the issue of pre-mined XRP. So a large portion of XRP was created up front, which some argue could impact the coin's value if a large amount is released into the market at once. It could dilute the supply and drive the price down.
That makes sense. Supply and demand. Economics 101, right?
Exactly.
And of course, we can't ignore the elephant in the room. The SEC lawsuit, the article mentions, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission sued Ripple back in 2020, claiming XRP should have been registered as a security, which sounds pretty serious.
It is, and this lawsuit is a major point of uncertainty for Ripple and XRP. Now, while Ripple denies those allegations, the outcome of this lawsuit could have a huge impact on XRP's future, because if the SEC wins, it could set a precedent that affects how other cryptocurrencies are regulated. So it's definitely something that anyone considering investing in XRP needs to keep a close eye on.
So it seems like XRP is kind of a paradox, embraced by institutions, but criticized for centralization, boasting all these benefits, but facing this potentially game-changing lawsuit. It's a complex picture for sure. But before we get too lost in the present, let's step back and look at where it all began. Who are the people behind Ripple?
Well, Ripple is the brainchild of Ripple Labs, formerly known as OpenCoin. It was founded in 2012, making XRP one of the oldest cryptos out there. And the founders, Chris Larsen and Jed McCaleb, they had this vision of using blockchain tech to revolutionize how financial institutions handled payments. They wanted to build a platform to bridge the gap between traditional finance and this new world of crypto.
So they were pioneers in a sense, recognizing the potential of blockchain before it became like a mainstream buzzword, but they both moved on to other projects, right?
That's right. They both went on to pursue other ventures, but their legacy lives on in Ripple and its impact on the financial world. But another important figure emerged, Brad Garlinghouse. He took over as CEO in 2017, and he's been credited with driving Ripple's adoption within the financial sector. So he's been steering the ship through some pretty choppy waters.
So Garlinghouse, he's got this strong tech background, right? He's worked with companies like Yahoo and EOL. So he seems to bring like a blend of business savvy and technical know-how to Ripple. But what does all of this mean for the average person, like someone who's maybe just hearing about Ripple for the first time? Why should they care about this?
That's the key question, right? Because Ripple and XRP, there might not be household names like Bitcoin, but they are impacting the financial world. And those ripples are starting to affect everyday people.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How are these ripples reaching us?
Well, think about how much our world relies on fast, secure, and affordable transfers of money, whether it's sending money to family overseas, paying for things online, receiving payments from clients in other countries. We all rely on financial systems, and let's be honest, those systems can be slow, expensive, full of inefficiencies. And Ripple is aiming to fix that.
So it's not just about banks making more money. It's about improving the way that money moves around the world for everyone.
Exactly, and that's what makes Ripple so fascinating. It's not just trying to compete with Bitcoin. It's a technology with the potential to change how we interact with money globally.
That's a powerful thought. But with so much innovation happening in the crypto space, where does Ripple truly fit in? Is it an ally to traditional finance? A disruptor? Or something else entirely?
That's a question that goes beyond just Ripple. I think it's about how we view the relationship between technology and the existing systems that it interacts with. Do we see it as a battle between old and new, or is there room for collaboration and integration?
It seems like Ripple is challenging that battle narrative.
Absolutely. If we go back to that idea of Ripple being a bridge between traditional finance and the crypto world, we have to ask, what kind of bridge is it? Is it a temporary solution to ease the transition to a fully decentralized future? Or is Ripple trying to create like a hybrid system where centralized and decentralized elements can coexist long term?
That's a big question. And I wonder, do most people even care about those philosophical distinctions? Like what matters to them? Is whether it works, does it make their lives easier? Does it save them time and money?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, and that's where Ripple's focus on. Practical applications is key. They're building real-world solutions for real-world problems. Remember those high transaction speeds and low fees? For businesses doing cross-border payments, that's revolutionary.
Okay, I get the benefits for companies. But what about individuals? How could Ripple change how we send and receive money personal?
Imagine sending money to family overseas instantly and for a fraction of what you'd pay through a bank, or picture paying for things online without worrying about those high transaction fees or waiting days for processing. That's the potential that Ripple offers.
So it's about convenience, affordability, speed, things we all value.
Exactly. And as Ripple's network grows and more financial institutions adopt the technology, those benefits are going to become even more tangible for everyone. We could see a world where sending money across borders is as easy as sending a text.
Now that's an exciting future, but it makes me wonder, what happens to traditional banks if Ripple succeeds? If cross-border payments become so cheap and efficient, do banks even have a role anymore?
That's the million-dollar question. That triggers a lot of debate because some people believe that cryptocurrencies and platforms like Ripple are the beginning of the end for traditional banking. They argue that decentralized systems are more efficient, transparent, and ultimately better for consumers.
It's like that disrupt or be disrupted mantra that we hear so much about. Banks have been around for centuries, but maybe their time is up.
It's certainly possible. However, there's another side to this coin because many people believe that banks are here to stay. You know, they have a long history, established infrastructure, and deep relationships with customers that crypto companies would struggle to replicate.
Plus, they've got governments and regulators on their side. There's a whole system built around them.
You're absolutely right. It's not a simple case of like crypto versus banks. There's a huge potential for collaboration, for banks to integrate blockchain technology and crypto into their systems.
So maybe it's not about replacement, but about finding ways to coexist and use each other's strengths.
Precisely. And that's where I think Ripple has a real opportunity. because they're not trying to build a separate financial system. They're trying to work within the current system and make it better.
It's like they're trying to be the translator between two different worlds, helping them understand each other and find some common ground.
I love that analogy, and that's why it's so important to understand the nuances of Ripple and XRP. They're not just another cryptocurrency. They represent a potential bridge between the old world of finance and the new world of blockchain tech. Whether that bridge leads to a complete transformation or a harmonious integration, only time will tell.
It's a captivating story that's still being written,
Uh-huh.
and one that we'll continue to follow closely. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to go back to the SEC lawsuit against Ripple. This seems like a pretty pivotal moment, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what's at stake here.
You're right, the SEC lawsuit is significant, not just for Ripple, but for the entire crypto industry, because the core issue is whether XRP should be classified as a security, which would mean a whole different set of regulations and could potentially limit its use and adoption.
So it's not just about whether Ripple did something wrong. It's about how we define and regulate cryptocurrencies as a whole.
Exactly. The outcome of this case could have a huge ripple effect across the entire crypto landscape if the SEC wins. It could set a precedent for how other cryptocurrencies are treated, and it could, potentially, slow down innovation and adoption.
That sounds like a worst-case scenario for crypto. But what happens if Ripple wins? What would that mean for XRP and the broader industry?
A win for Ripple would be a major victory, not just for the company, but for the idea that cryptocurrencies can exist and thrive within existing regulations. It would signal to investors and institutions that XRP is a legitimate asset, and that could potentially lead to more adoption and investment.
So there's a lot riding on this case, it feels like. We're all just watching and waiting to see how it unfolds.
We are, and that's what makes the Ripple story so compelling. It's a microcosm of the larger conversation about innovation, regulation, and the evolving relationship between traditional systems and new technologies.
It's a story full of twists and turns, and one that we'll continue to unpack in the final part of our deep dive. So stay tuned, because the most interesting part is yet to come. Okay, so we're back and ready to keep digging into Ripple. We've talked about the technology and some of the benefits and drawbacks, but I want to touch on something we mentioned earlier, that SEC lawsuit. This seems like a pretty big deal. What are your thoughts on what's really at stake here?
Yeah, you're right. The SEC lawsuit is huge, not just for Ripple, but for the whole crypto world. Basically, it all boils down to whether XRP should be considered a security. If it is, that means a whole new set of rules. And it could really limit how people use and adopt XRP.
So it's not even just about whether Ripple messed up. It's about how we think about and regulate crypto in general.
That's it. Yeah, the outcome of this case could totally change the entire crypto landscape. Like, imagine if the SEC wins. It sets a precedent for how other cryptos are treated, and it could really slow down innovation and adoption.
That sounds like a nightmare for crypto. But what if Ripple wins? What does that mean for XRP and the rest of the industry?
A win for Ripple would be huge. Not just for them, but for the idea that cryptocurrencies can actually work within the current rules and regulations. It tells investors and institutions, hey, XRP is legit, and that could lead to way more adoption and investment.
So, yeah, there's a lot riding on this. It feels like everyone's just holding their breath, waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, we are. It's what makes the whole Ripple story so interesting. It's like a tiny version of this bigger conversation about innovation and regulation and how traditional systems adapt to these new technologies.
Absolutely, it's a story with a lot of twists and turns, and we're going to keep exploring it in the final part of our deep dive. So stick around, because things are about to get even more interesting. We're back, and now it's time to zoom out a little. Look at the big picture. We're living through this massive tech revolution, right? And it's changing everything. So where does Ripple fit into all of this? Is it a force for good, a sign of disruption, or something in between?
Ooh, that's a question that could go on forever. I think it really depends on how you see the role of technology in our society. If you believe that tech should empower people and challenge old systems, then you probably see Ripple as a positive thing. It's taking on these huge financial institutions and offering a better way to move money around, faster, cheaper, and more transparently.
It's almost like democratizing finance. giving more control to the people.
That's a great way to put it, and it's an especially powerful idea when you think about all the people who don't have access to banks or are underserved by traditional finance. Ripple could really bridge that gap.
But what about the people who value stability and security? Wouldn't they see Ripple as a risk, a source of disruption?
That's a fair point. Anytime you introduce new tech, there's always a risk of something going wrong. And with money, the stakes are incredibly high, we have to be aware of. The potential downsides, volatility, bad actors, unintended consequences.
So it's about finding the right balance, right? Weighing the potential for positive change against the need to be careful.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to have these conversations, to explore different perspectives, to really consider the potential benefits and risks. There's no easy answer. And what works in one situation might not work in another, but by talking about it, hopefully we can figure out how to navigate this new world in a way that benefits everyone.
I think that's what we've been trying to do in this deep dive, looking at Ripple from all sides, the good, the bad, the opportunities, the challenges. But at the end of the day, whether you see Ripple as a force for good or a potential disruptor, that's a decision each person has to make.
I agree. It's all about making informed choices. We've presented the information, the different viewpoints. Now it's up to each listener to decide where they stand on Ripple.
So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with one final thought. We've been talking about Ripple as this bridge between traditional finance and the world of crypto. But what if it's even more than that? What if it's actually a catalyst for a whole wave of new ideas in the world of finance?
I love that it reminds us that we're still at the very beginning of this technological revolution, and the possibilities are endless. Ripple might just be one piece of the puzzle, but it's a piece that could change how we use money for years to come.
It's an exciting time to be alive, and we'll be here exploring it all with you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Ripple, and keep those minds curious. Okay, so we're back. For the last part of our Ripple deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. The tech, the potential, the challenges. But now I kind of want to zoom out. Look at the bigger picture. We're in this era of crazy tech change, right? It's changing everything. So where does Ripple fit into this? Is it a good thing? A disruptive thing? Something else?
That is the question, isn't it? I think it comes down to how you see technology's role in society. If you think tech should give people more power and challenge old, outdated systems, then Ripple might seem like a good thing. It's going up against these huge financial institutions and offering a faster, cheaper, more transparent way to move money around.
Yeah, like it's almost democratizing finance.
Exactly, putting more control in the hands of the people. And that's a really powerful idea, especially when you think about all the people who don't have bank accounts or are ignored by traditional banks. Ripple could be a way to connect them to the global economy.
What about the people who
Yeah.
value stability, security? Would they see Ripple as like a risky thing?
That's a totally valid concern. I mean, with any new technology, there's a chance things could go wrong. And with something like money, the risks are really high. We have to be aware of the potential downsides. Like, what if the market crashes? What if someone tries to cheat the system? What if it causes unintended problems?
Right, so it's like walking a tightrope, trying to balance the potential benefits with the need to be careful.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations are so important, to get different perspectives out there and really think about the pros and cons. There's no easy answer. And what works in one place might not work somewhere else. But if we talk about it and consider all the angles, hopefully we can figure out how to make this new world work for everyone.
And I think that's what we've been trying to do here in this deep dive, examining Ripple. From every angle, the good, the bad, the exciting stuff, the scary stuff. But in the end, it's up to each person to decide what they think about Ripple, whether they see it as a force for good or a potential threat.
Absolutely. We've laid out the information, the different arguments. Now it's up to each listener to make up their own mind.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. We talked about Ripple as this bridge, right, between traditional finance and the crypto world. But what if it's actually even better than that? What if Ripple is actually the spark that ignites a whole wave of new ideas, new innovations in finance?
Ooh, I like that. That's a good reminder that we're still in the early days of this whole tech revolution. And there's so much potential. Ripple could be just one piece of the puzzle, but it's a piece that could really change the way we use money in the future.
It really is an exciting time, and we'll be here with you exploring all the possibilities. So thanks for joining us on this Ripple Deep Dive. Keep asking those questions, folks, and keep those minds curious.